We are building the calculator project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Previously, we saw how we can give the functionality to this single button 7. And notice when I click it, it appends itself to whatever was already in the text box. Now, obviously, we need this functionality for all the numbers, which means this entire group of keys, the first category of buttons that we had seen, which means that we need to somehow create functions that do this job for every key. Now, obviously, one method could be I can create, let's say, for example, I can make changes, let's say, plus num7. Then I can create a function called plus num8. I can create a function called press num9 and so on and so forth. But clearly, that's not a good idea because that is too much work for, let's say, achieving the functionality. The next obvious thought that comes to our mind is that, okay, why don't I pass an argument into this function? Let's say call it num. And instead of fixing this to 7, I say, well, convert this string to num. Convert the num to a string and append that to the text box. Now, this sounds extremely logical. So when I come in here, I tell my function to press, for example, press num 7, and I think I can do that like 8, 9, 10, and so on and so forth. Sounds very logical, but unfortunately, this does not work. We can see this. When I run my code, notice there is already a 7 over here. However, when I click 7, nothing seems to happen. So this solution clearly does not work. We will first see how to make this whole thing work. That brings us face to face with a new concept, with this concept of lambda functions. We will see how the problem first gets solved before we take a deeper dive into what lambda functions really are. So the solution for this thing is really to put a lambda over here. So we just go and say, look, command is equal to say lambda and, colon and then press 7. Now this looks kind of magical. What exactly goes on with this lambda coming in? Well, lambda is really like an anonymous a single expression function. So what's going on really is that we are sort of, tricking this whole system, which did not allow us to pass arguments into this function. Instead, what we're doing is to create a function which has no name. When the click command is clicked, I run that function, and that function in turn goes and calls this press num with this argument of 7. So kind of like a two-step, but that works for us. We can see this working, and then we will extend this to, let's say, all the other buttons, right? So when I run this, notice now, first of all, the entry label is empty when it comes in. When I click 7, notice I have the functionality back. 7 is getting appended. Lambda is doing the magic for us. Now, given that this is happening, let us go and put this command in all the number buttons. So I'll go and copy this, and I'll put this, for example, in, let's say 8 with an input of 8. I'm going to put this, for example, in, let's say 9 with an input of 9. Now I don't need to put this in the operator because the slash and the C are not the number buttons. I come in here and I say, okay, let me put this of say 4 with an input with an argument of 4. Let me put this in here for an argument of say 5. Let me put this in here for say an argument of say 6. And then I come back down to this and I say, okay, let me put this here for, let's say 1. Let's put this over here for, let's say, 2. And finally, I go and put this for, let's say, 3. And then, I must come to the very last row. I'm going to put this for, let's say, for say 0. So obviously this number has to be 0. And finally, I'll also put this for the decimal point, because really decimal point is like a number. Once I enter the decimal point, it essentially gets appended to the whatever is on the text box, right? So here, notice decimal point is a string. So I'll just pass a string, dot to it. Now, really, this is quite amazing because what's going to happen is that in all these buttons now, this anonymous function lambda is going to get created. It will get executed with a different input to the press num. And inside press num, all I'm doing is that I'm converting whatever I'm getting to the string and adding that to what I read back. And first, let's see this working. So when I, let's say, run this code, I get, for example, now 1 is working. I can now enter anything, 1, 2, 3 point, let's say 5, 6, again, I can be quite, let's say, 0. Right now, there's nothing to clear this. So let's just say I run this again. I say 1, 2, 4, 8, 9, 6.356, whatever I want, it is now working for me. Now, the magic has really happened through this lambda function. We are going to talk about this in the next video in a little bit more detail, but I hope you found this interesting. And you can see that we have clearly made a lot of progress with respect to making our calculator work. In general, if you think this way of learning makes things more clear to you, makes you understand how concepts are applied, look at our website because that's how we learn Python. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.